Ladies and gentlemen, can we start? We'd like to just. Can I ask the participants to? Okay, we'll go ahead with the closing session. We'd like to give some of the main conclusions that were obtained during this conference, and I'll just have to ask us to close the door. Thank you. I'd like to start with some of the conclusions for the opening session, which I believe that most of us found very interesting and I think very insightful. And I think some of the important points which were mentioned this morning by either His Excellency the Prime Minister or the Minister of Investment focused on 2 or 3 key messages, and I hope that I'm sure that was clear to all of us. The encouragement, the importance of the private sector investment to fuel the growth for the coming period. In terms of the reforms that the current government is undertaking, it was mentioned that the government is working on several pillars, basically on the legislative, on the procedural, and most importantly on dispute settlement resolution. At this point, I'd like to clarify something because I think that was picked up during the session with the private sector. Currently, we have a very effective mechanism for investor dispute settlement, and it is on several layers. Initially, we have the interministerial committee, which is hosted here at the General Authority for Investment, and that committee handles the government and private sector disputes. Additionally, due to the amendment which happened in the investment law in January 2012, we also have what is called the Contracts Committee, and that is headed by the Prime Minister. The number of cases that His Excellency the Minister of Investment mentioned this morning, most of them were resolved at that level. Damak, Al-Hukir, many of the contracts which were related to land disputes. In addition to that, we have 2 other mechanisms. One is the Settlement Committee, which handles private to private sector disputes, and of course the Arbitration Center, which is located here at GAFI. In addition to that, there is the Regional Center for International Arbitration, which is also in Cairo, and where we believe that this is a very good platform and sort of mechanism for arbitration, because I think there were issues that were raised during the investor session, and so I believe that the existing mechanisms serve the purpose very well. In terms of additional points which were mentioned by the EU ambassador, he touched upon the deep and comprehensive free trade area. He touched upon also the need for the government to address the court cases against privatization, the energy supply, the labor issues, and I think that was also taken up at the second session. In terms of the EBRD, it was mentioned that there was an expansion of the mandate of the EBRD to reach $1 billion, and that the host office was already opened in Cairo. In addition to that, there is a $100 million transition fund for the region, and also the Arab Forum on Asset Recovery, in addition to the Capital Markets Access Initiative. So these 4 main key areas were discussed by the EBRD or the EU delegation as a sort of some of the key areas that they're working on. Concerning the second session, which we had the Central Bank of Egypt. We also had the CEO of the Islamic Corporation for Insurance of Investment and Export Credit, the IEC, and the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation, in addition to the EBRD and the IFC. And some of the main points which were touched upon, for example, by the ICIEC, were risk coverage. It was mentioned that prior to January 25th, maybe the risk profile of Egypt was perceived differently. And today there is, according to the mandate of the bank, there is room for providing products which would cover some of the risks inherent currently, such as FX transfer risk, risk of expropriation, and also to ensure the sovereign financial obligations. I think one interesting point which was picked up was the fact that the ICIEC was currently funding one of the very important Egyptian companies, which is El-Suwaidi, and that was for the construction of the River Nile electrification project in Sudan. And I'm just like to reiterate this piece of information because I think that's a perfect example of how the IDB is supporting Egyptian corporates in their investments in Africa. The ITFC alluded to an agreement that was already conducted in the oil and gas sector in Egypt, in addition to the Social Fund for Development, a finance line for supporting SMEs. And I think that's a very good step, in addition to the technical assistance which is also being provided. The comments which were given by Mr. Philip of the EBRD, I think were also very well received. He talked about the stability, the necessity of stability for going forward. In spite of the challenges that we're facing in Egypt, he mentioned something very interesting, that we should slice our problems or try to sort of address the issues in a minimized fashion, and I do agree with that. And he also touched upon a very important and key factor, which is the importance of brain power. And he mentioned it very clearly. There was no talent deficit in Egypt, and I think we would all agree to that, and I think that was one of the important aspects. Of course, on policy issues, there were comments concerning the necessity for a roadmap for price liberalization, in addition to the encouragement for the SME sector, given that employs around 80 to 85% and only takes about 55% of the credit extended by the banking system. So this shows you how the SME sector is underfinanced from the banking sector. The need for collateral security was also touched upon to conduct transactions which require collateral, whether movable securities or otherwise. The IFC also had interesting comments on their business here in Egypt, whether on the advisory or equity side. And an important point was the need for the government to conduct the regulatory impact assessment, or RIA, which I believe that we do have through the program or the project, which is the IRADA project, which is currently being hosted by the Ministry of Investment. I believe that those are the key sort of comments and feedback that we had during the two sessions. I'll leave you to perhaps continue with the investor session.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Neveen. I'll just go over the major highlights of session 2, which is on the investors' perspectives on doing business in Egypt. That was quite a lively, I should say, session. Not so, the other were not lively, but this one was a bit challenging. And we have heard views from across the spectrums, local investors, foreign investors, and we had different views. We had a reflection of a very positive experience, and we have some feedback on not so much positive experience, but it was good feedback, important feedback for the country, for the government, and for us all. Now, in terms of the key issues raised in this session, the one major issue that was touched upon by the panelists was the importance of stability. When you have a country going through transition, sometimes difficult transition, stability is a key issue, because when you have stability, it's important that for the business to be able to plan into the future. And without stability, you could really hardly do anything of that nature. The other, how would I say, key issue that was raised is the issue of the foreign exchange. The panelists thought that to have a good cap, a good policy on foreign exchange is important for companies, because in the end they would like to be able to move their revenues and profits as they see it fit in terms of their investments elsewhere. And the third issue that was highlighted is the ability to purchase land, and this has to be taken into consideration to allow investors more freedom to come in and purchase land to do business and investment on. And of course, the obvious one which was raised is just to get rid of the red tape. As we know, in all governments, not only in this country, in other countries, many countries, the issue of red tape is there, and then we have to really consider having less and less of it in order to induce foreign investments into the country. Now, some of the solutions that were proposed by the panelists were like to focus on establishing more free trade zones throughout Egypt, and also to encourage the government to do some more preparedness and plans to deal with natural disasters, pandemics, and others. And also to look at more closely issues of arbitration, and probably enforce the existing arbitration mechanism to allow address grievances from investors from different regions. So that's basically some of the issues and solutions raised in the investors panel. Do you have anything to add on this?
Maybe just to thank the actual companies. I don't know if they're represented here, but I think we need to recognize them. Sumitomo, Polaris, Total, General Motors, Bavaria, Omat Group, and Menas Group. So in addition to Swedi, Citadel, TCI Sanmar, Toyota, and SIAC. So if anyone is present, we'd like to thank you for your contribution and participation in during the session.
Now, for the last session, session 3, on the showcasing of the experience of Turkey and Malaysia, and the role of IFIs in attracting foreign investments into the country. Some of the issues that were raised, again, the political stability, the need for that to allow business to come in and do investments. So therefore, it goes without saying, but nevertheless, it was highlighted again and again in the sessions throughout. Of course, it touched also on the experience of the two countries on the regulation side, the kind of legislative policies and schemes that were introduced to attract foreign direct investment, and I hope that it was taken note of, and hopefully it will be emulated also here in Egypt. There were striking similarities between, for example, Turkey and Egypt in terms of the size and the location. So this is probably would bring the experience much closer. The session focused on really how the Malaysians and the Turkish were able to package the country in terms of the schemes and incentives for investors and the reforms that they introduced to build an enabling environment for investments, and therefore led to the attractions of more foreign direct investment to the country. And hopefully GAFI and Egypt has taken note of such experience and to emulate, as also it was intervened by my colleague, Mr. Hariri, that the IDB will be willing to lend some assistance and resources in terms of providing capacity building for the GAFI and the ministry officials to go and learn from the experiences of Turkey and Malaysia. So in a nutshell, that was the main issues raised in session 3. And if you allow me, I'd just like to conclude by saying, one has asked me early on about my impression of this forum so far. And I paused to find the right word for it. And the only thing that came to my mind is, we did it. Before coming here, we got so much suggestions, recommendations from some of the people that we were talking to, from even some of our partners. They were concerned about the climate that's going on right now and before the 30th, and whether it would be still appropriate to keep this forum, important forum, on schedule and on time. We stayed the course with the help of the Ministry of Investment, with GAFI, with the Ministry of International Cooperation, with all of you, with our partners, and we kept it and we made it, and I think that's an achievement by itself. So I want to thank you for that. This forum is important, it's good for Egypt, it's going to help, inshallah, Egypt to prepare its case in a very convincing way when we go to London on September 16. Because over there, we will have a huge crowd of G8 investors. We will have IFI's international organization, and therefore it is important for Egypt to go there, to be prepared, and to do a damn good job to bring investors and invest in this country. And again, I want to thank you all for your participation. I want to thank our partner, GAFI, Ministry of Investment, Ministry of International Cooperation, Ministry of Finance, Trade and Industry, and all of the IFI partners and colleagues, and very importantly, our moderators, our panelists, and all of the participants.
Can I add to that, the team, the GAFI team, can you just raise your hands and thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And the translators.
And also our team from the IDB.
Of course, IDB team.
The Residence Forum.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, and I hope that we all meet again in London in September. Just one last note on a bright spot. The Central Bank of Egypt just released the 9-month figures for Egypt's FDI, and I'd just like to share it with the audience. It's reached 1.44 billion US dollars. I couldn't resist saying that, Alex, because I think it's an opportunity, and it's a 4-fold increase than the 6-month figures, which were 300 million, which were mentioned this morning by His Excellency. So I think it's still low by Egypt's standards, 1.4 billion, but at least we're on the uprise, inshallah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.